All right. Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. As always, our official sponsor is Running Aces, Racetrack, Casino, and Hotel. And our other sponsors are Learn Pro Poker and Website AMP. In this chats edition of the podcast, we're going to hang out with Dara O'Kearney. He's an Irish author, professional poker player. You guys know who he is. Mega runner, ultra runner, crazy stuff. Excited to chat with him again. Let's first introduce our panel. My name is Steve Fredland. I go by Rec Poker Steve in our Poker Stars home game. And I love what Penn Jillette said. He said, poker has the feeling of a sport, but you don't have to do push-ups. I love it.
And I'm Chris Jones, 5x5 on Twitter and Poker Stars, and I've been reading a lot of sci-fi lately, and this is a quote for all you Nash Equilibrium fans. Ursula Le Guin wrote, "To light a candle is to cast a shadow."
Oh.
Nice. Another fantasy callback for Rob and I.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Reed, Bluffsterini in the home games, and I'll just say that you got to know when to play your hand versus your opponent's range and when to play your range against your opponent's range. Good luck with that.
And I'm John Somsky, Poker Geek MN everywhere, and I would just like to remind everyone to have fun while you play.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Radman50 everywhere. And if you don't have 15 minutes a day to meditate, you need to meditate for an hour a day.
Nice. I love it. That's genius. All right, guys. One quick thing before we jump in. If you are a paid member, I know there's a bunch of you out there, you're paid premium members. When you play your home game on Tuesday nights with us on Poker Stars, join the Zoom call. It's free with your membership. You jump in there. A bunch of us paid members are out there harassing each other over Zoom while we play. And every once in a while, we get some special guests that drop by, some great poker personalities that stop by and say hi. So it's really a fun time. We call it the Online Play and Hang, or OPA for short, and it's part of being a member. So jump in there if you're not already doing that on Tuesday nights. So with that, let's bring him in. Dara O'Kearney, how are we doing, young man?
Doing well. Delighted to be back. Really enjoyed the last time. Looking forward to this. It's fair to say it's a good bit later here than it is where you guys are, but I'm a night owl anyway, so it's all good.
Is that about 1:30 in the morning, or what time is it for
It's
you?
12:30.
12:30. Oh, that's nothing. Yeah. That's nothing.
Yeah,
right?
I know. Yeah.
For somebody who's as crazy as an ultra runner, I mean, 12:30 in the morning. What is that?
No, it's 12:30 after midnight.
Right. Yeah. I call that the morning.
Oh, the morning. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I know. Maybe. Okay. So Ireland's maybe different. Maybe that's noon. Midnight is noon for you. I mean, maybe it's all.
Ireland's different.
Ireland is very different. Yeah.
Oh man. So,
no. When you say morning, I think I automatically assume of the midday one being. Morning,
I think poker.
But you're right.
Generally,
technically, this is morning.
2 a.m. for poker players is still evening, I think, is how that works for a lot of those folks. Well, let's catch up a little bit. How have you been since our last time we chatted? I think we were talking about the other book at the time, the Poker Satellite Strategy, and since then we've got a new book. So maybe just catch us up a little bit. What's life been like for you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, like everybody else probably listening, I've been very much confined to home quarters. In fact, I said to my wife this morning that I haven't been out without 3 miles of my house since March. Last poker tournament was just before lockdown started here. I was over in London for a tournament by my sponsors. Came back, we immediately went into lockdown. And since then, I've basically been at home. I've been playing a lot online and doing the other stuff that I do as well. The podcast, the Chip Race. We also started a spin-off show from that for YouTube called The Lock-In, to sort of capitalize on the fact that we had more spare time. Published the second book in June, PKO Poker Strategy. And I've also been playing a lot online and doing a lot of coaching. Online poker, it definitely in the early days of lockdown, got sort of a huge boost as people who maybe hadn't played for years, exclusively live players suddenly had no option but to, if they want to keep their poker fix going, to play online. So we did see the numbers grow very rapidly at the start. I think they tapered off again after a while as people realized that maybe online isn't exactly live poker. But yeah, I've basically played more online this year, I would say, than I have in the last 6 or 7 years.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the COVID thing. Obviously, that's what we're all talking about. And I did see, Ireland's kind of even more restrictions now. You've kind of hit that second peak, the
Yeah.
second wave of things, and even some travel restrictions there. So, us in the States, or maybe Jim in Canada, or the people that are listening generally have a good feel for what it's like in their area. But tell us a little bit about what this journey's been like for the people of Ireland.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the start, we were obviously looking at the examples of our fairly near neighbours, places like Italy, France, and Spain, where it was really, really badly out of control. And people were kind of scared that the same thing was going to happen here. So the government acted very quickly and went straight to a fairly severe lockdown, which thankfully was very effective. And our numbers stayed relatively low.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's still obviously very sad that over 1,000 people died, but compared to other countries, we got off relatively lightly. I think that's because there was a fairly quick response, and the public also adhered to the guidelines really well. Then basically summer came and it had almost disappeared. So everybody relaxed. The lockdown restrictions were relaxed. The travel bans were all relaxed, and we actually allowed tourists in from all over the world, basically. So it's probably not too surprising that we're unfortunately now going into a second wave, and it seems somewhat out of control again, similar to how it was at the start. So the government actually announced today that they're going back to the most severe, what they call level 5 lockdown for the next 6 weeks. We're hoping that will get the situation back under control again. I mean, obviously we have some advantages in that we're in an island, but the way I see it, this is a global pandemic. So, until it's gone pretty much on a worldwide scale, we're never, it's always going to come back. Like as soon as we relax the restrictions and allow people to come in or allow people to go out and come back, you're going to have the same problem. So that's kind of where we are now. I'm very lucky in that I'm one of the least affected people by it, and that I can do my work pretty much all of it apart from live poker from home. So I feel very fortunate on that front. And I know from talking to other friends who have normal jobs, they're definitely far more affected. I think it's been tough for people as well, because it's almost like this year hasn't happened for a lot of people. They've been confined to home. They haven't been able to do their normal lives. So I think the first lockdown in Ireland, there was a very strong sense that people were, let's just get this done with. It's necessary. But it's noticeable second time around, there's a lot more people not that keen to go back into lockdown. People arguing that we just have to get on with it and learn to live with it or whatever. So I think the second lockdown is going to be a lot tougher on people.
Yeah, I think so. I was reading a bit about it today. I'm like, I love a lot of the restrictions that are put in place, the travel stuff. But yeah, I think everybody gets fatigued, right? Even those of us who've been trying to be really disciplined, it's hard. And like you said, it's kind of the year that didn't happen, but it's also the year that's lasted for a decade.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, in some ways it feels like the year just flew by, because I went out for a run today, and as I was coming back to our estate, it was getting dark, and I realized we're not actually far off from seeing people put up Christmas lights now. Right. And it literally only feels like a few weeks since I last saw the Christmas lights. It feels like the year has just flown by, because every day is kind of the same, and that sort of plays tricks with your mind. And I mean, again, I do feel fortunate in that, like, I think my natural personality kind of suits me for this. I'm not as greatly affected, but I know some people who are, very depressed about the situation, and understandably, because it's made a bigger difference to their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, from a work perspective, I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, nobody's expecting me to go to meetings. I can just do it over Zoom. So it's great, but it's a huge impact. So, well, let's talk. Thanks for sharing some of that. Let's talk a little bit about the chip race. Talk about what's going on there. For those of you who are out there listening in Rec Poker World, if you're not aware of it, fantastic podcast, the chip race. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, we pretty much just kept that going as we planned. We had planned to make, I think it was 21 shows in the year from February to the next February. So we've kept on pace with that. But what we did was, when we were traveling more, we used to put them out in batches. So we would do 3 or 4, and then we take a few weeks off. But this time we decided, since everybody's stuck at home, we tried to be more regular. So essentially what we've been doing for most of the pandemic has been putting one out every 2 weeks, so that it's regular, but at the same time we're just shows that we were going to make anyway, so we don't have to sort of skimp on the quality. It's always hard to run down good guests to do all the preparation, etc. So we've kept it going on that front. Our next show is coming out next week, I think, and that's got Max Silver and Melissa Burr as the two guests. It's already been recorded, but we haven't put it out yet because we kind of had time on our hands, and like a lot of what we do for our sponsor Unibet is sort of meet and greets at events that they run. And obviously Unibet were one of the first people to realize there would be no live events this year, and they canceled them all. So to kind of give them more value, we started the secondary show, which we also put out fortnightly, the Lock-In, which the initial concept was just a YouTube show where it's just myself, David, and a guest shooting the breeze for about an hour. It's meant to be kind of more topical and more throwaway than, say, the chip race. The chip race, we kind of feel like people could go back and listen to a show from 4 or 5 years ago, and they still get a lot out of it. You know, it has strategy content in it. The interviews try to be timeless. The only piece really in the main podcast that isn't timeless is obviously the news, but that's just a short segment, which I think most people skip anyway. Right. But the idea of this was more, it was just we talk about whatever was going on in the poker world at the time with the guest, sort of more topical, more current. We've been putting that out every fortnight as well in the weeks where there's no chip race going out. So basically, from the point of view of listeners of the show, something goes out every week now. As I said, it was initially only YouTube only, but so many of our listeners are creatures of podcasts, and they kind of wanted it made available. So now it's available on iTunes and the other places where the chip race is available. So if people don't want to see our ugly faces, they can
Right.
that way.
Yeah, man, I was just gonna make a joke about David's ugly face, then you totally beat me to it there. I've been waiting for a chance to slag on David in this interview. God.
One of the things you can do with the Lock-In is you can watch it sequentially, and you can see David just gradually get bigger and bigger and bigger on screen as the Lock-In gets in. Other than that, I think I was very, very wary of doing this show, I have to say, because I always felt a part of the pleasure of the chip race was that people didn't actually have to see us. Hopefully more people are listening to us on iTunes than on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna put John Somsky on the spot because we've talked about our audience listening. Like John is one of these guys. He listens to podcasts at like 2.5x speed or more. I don't even know. John, is the chip race one of those that you can do? Can you listen to the Irish accent in 2.5x, or what do you do there?
No, that one I slow down a little bit. When I first start listening to someone with a foreign accent, I start off a little slower, but over time you can get up and listen at it 2.5, 2.7.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, I mean, Chad McVean said the same thing to us. He said that he listens to all of his podcasts at speed, but at the beginning he couldn't do that with us, but he got used to it over time. So
yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. I think we need to start doing a segment where John Somsky impersonates the guest at 2.5x.
Well,
I can only imagine what David sounds like because he's already quite high pitched.
Well, all of the programs, they adjust the pitch.
Okay, that's right. So it's not like the old-fashioned chipmunk sound.
No, it's not the chipmunk sound at all. It's more like you're just really talking really fast, and you don't have very many pauses in what you're saying, and all the space that's between the words are taken out, so that everything's very, very fast.
Okay,
Nice.
that makes sense.
That was pretty good, but now I want to hear the chipmunk version. Maybe
Maybe we'll splice some of that in later. Here's what they really sound like. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the book now. So. I mean, like the year that lasted a decade, we got the new book out there. And so, let's talk first a little bit about the other one, the Poker Satellite Strategy. I know when we talked about it, it was going really well. I guess now that chapter, people can still buy the book, and I encourage you to do it. But now that chapter is kind of closed, talk a little bit about, retrospectively looking at that book and then how that moved yourself into the PKO book.
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, Satellite was the first book that I'd ever done. Not the first that Barry had done. Barry had produced a couple of books with Jared Tendler, Mental Game Poker 1 and 2. So he'd kind of been through the process and he kind of prepared me for it. But to be honest, we had no idea how the book would be received. You never really know. And he very successfully dampened my expectations, telling me like what the average poker book sells, which is not very much, how quickly it kind of disappears from, people typically buy it in the first 4 to 6 weeks and then it just more or less disappears. So it's fair to say I had very low expectations, and I was really just more geared on I wanted people to get value from the book rather than what it was going to sell. Now, thankfully, it did exceed expectations very comfortably, and actually, it's still selling very well. Even now, like it's kind of surprising to me because it's been out for 18 months now or whatever it is. You would think most people who wanted the book would have it already, but no, it is still selling every month. So that was a very positive experience, and also the reaction to it was really good, both in terms of people telling us what they thought of the book and also, people leaving Amazon reviews and stuff like that. So that was a really positive experience. So we kind of decided we were going to do a second book anyway, and we kicked around a few ideas, and the reason why we settled on PKOs was similar to Satellites. There wasn't much content out there. In fact, I think I believe it's the first book on PKOs. There's also not a ton of content out there in general because they are a very recent format. But at the same time, it's a format which is really catching on online, more so than live. So it was slightly different on a number of fronts. First of all, like Satellite was obviously aimed at both live players and online players because you can play Satellites both live and online, and essentially it's the same strategy. PKOs are predominantly an online beast, so it's a smaller audience to begin with. It's online players, but on the other hand, and another difference is obviously Satellites were my bread and butter for going back almost 10 years. They were a format that I was considered to be exceptional in, so it wasn't that hard to sell an idea of me writing a Satellite book. PKOs, because they're relatively new, there are no real established experts in them, and I certainly wasn't expert at the start. So for me, there was a lot more I was learning as we went, and if I were to look back at the first drafts that we produced, there's a lot of stuff in there which just didn't make the end product, because as we went, my ideas changed on PKOs and the best way to tackle them. So there was a couple of dead ends along the way. There was a lot of learning for me as well, which was fine because I had kind of realized that PKOs were going to be the dominant online poker format. So I wanted to switch to them anyway. So this is work I would have been doing anyway for my own benefit to sort of learn PKOs. But yeah, a lot of work with the solvers. So typically what I would do is I'd go away, run a lot of simulations, work out some sort of conceptual framework to explain stuff. And then I'd explain it to Barry. If I could explain it to Barry, then the idea was we had something which could go in the book, because people would be able to read that without having to run the hundreds of hours of simulations that I had run. So it was a lot more labor intensive from my perspective. But at the same time, as I said, it's kind of work that I would have been doing anyway, because PKOs are kind of taking over online.
I wanted to just jump in and make sure all our listeners are on the same page here as we kind of jump in. And can you just talk about what is a PKO and why do you think they're so growing and to be so popular?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, they actually have different names as well, which kind of adds to the confusion. PKO is probably the most common name. It's a progressive knockout. And the idea is that every time you knock a player out of a tournament, everybody starts with a bounty on their head, which is usually half of the buy-in. So if you're playing a $100 tournament, $50 goes on bounty and $50 goes into the normal prize pool. If you knock somebody out at the start, you win an immediate $25, and $25 gets added to your head, to your bounty. So your bounty is $75 rather than $50. And then if somebody knocks you out, they get $37.50, and $37.50 goes onto your head. So that's the idea of progressive. The bounties get progressively larger. As I said, it has a couple of different names. Progressive knockout is the one which kind of was used the most at the start, but now you'll sometimes see them referred to as bounty builders, which again is the same idea. Everybody starts with a bounty and the bounties build over time. You also have some geographical terms. In the UK, they're sometimes referred to as headhunters or scalps, but they're all the same idea. A certain percentage of the prize pool, usually half, goes to the knockout pool, and that rewards people for knocking people out. The other half goes to the normal. So you're kind of playing two different tournaments. You're trying to knock people out because you win immediate money when you do that, in addition to the chips that you get, and that fundamentally changes the strategy. There's a lot of spots where you would have a hand which you would never consider calling, but if the guy is shoving for a quarter of the starting stack and he has a large bounty on his head, then it might be a situation where you don't even have cards. You just have to call because of the bounty. So a lot of the strategic adjustment is kind of knowing how much wider you have to go because of the bounty. And we spend a lot of time in the book explaining that. And normally online players in particular have fairly good idea of how much equity a hand has against a typical shoving range. So they know that ace king in most spots is a call against a shove for a relatively from a short stack, but they know the 7-2 off is a fold. But the difficulty with the bounty builders, or PKOs as they're called, is sometimes 7-2 off is a call. You have to work out like how much additional equity you have to add in because of the bounty element. As to why they're so popular, I mean, I believe they first appeared on the scene about 5 or 6 years ago on a French site, Winamax. And I mean, they were just incredibly popular. And the same pattern has followed everywhere, every major online site where they've been introduced. At the start, there tends to be sort of resistance. People go, oh, this new format, I don't know about this. But as soon as people try it, they absolutely love it. They literally do spread like wildfire. I was thinking about this on my run today, actually, when I was running in my local park and I saw a gray squirrel. Now, when I was young, you didn't see gray squirrels. You saw red squirrels because they were native to Ireland. The gray squirrels came in at some later point, but once they were introduced, they became the dominant form because they're more aggressive than the red squirrels, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of took over. Exact same thing has happened with PKOs on every single site that's brought them in. They start as a sort of a small minority and they just spread. You can see now when you go on, main Poker Stars, over half the tournaments are PKOs or bounty builders. GG is the most recent site where a similar phenomenon has happened. It's not difficult to see why they're so popular. First of all, I think for recreations, they're just far more fun. There's the instant gratification when you knock people out of getting a prize. They incentivize you to play looser, which is more fun anyway. I mean, who enjoys having to fold 90% of hands? And a lot of the things I think which people don't enjoy about online poker actually kind of go away in PKOs. For example, when you're short stacked in a normal tournament and you're anywhere near the money, you're very heavily incentivized to stall every hand to try and ladder. And that's really painful. Like if you're playing an online tournament and literally 7 out of the 9 people on your table are taking 30 seconds a minute to fold pre-flop or on every single decision, that just sort of ruins the user experience. In a PKO, when you're short stacked, you're not incentivized to do that. You're incentivized to double up as quickly as possible to get yourself back into a situation where you can start competing for bounties. So you just don't see the same degree of stalling. So that's another thing which is much better in PKOs. And I think a friend, I didn't actually think about this until recently, but a recreational friend who did move across to playing PKOs said that was actually one of the biggest factors for him. He enjoyed so much just being able to play, a nice, loose, gambly style, nobody stalling, everybody playing fast. It's just a much better user experience. And I think that's been another reason. I also think that if you have sort of any inkling of what the strategy is, you can actually have very, very big edges in it. And I know a couple of recreational players that I coach who are absolutely crushing PKOs. Because another factor which has happened is like a lot of pros have resisted moving across to them because they've spent years perfecting, in inverted commas, normal tournament strategy. And on the chip race, we've interviewed a few absolute beasts like Feraldo and Marty Mattis to name but but 2. And they said they don't like PKOs. They don't want to play them because they just, that's not what they're used to. They're used to the normal tournaments. So I think the player pools are also softer because of that. A lot of the better players have resisted moving across. A lot more recreations are jumping in because they're more fun. So I think it's a combination of all those factors, which is why it's proven so popular.
Yeah, I've been playing knockouts for, it feels like a long time, and it definitely suits my playing style better than just a freeze out ICM where it's all at the top. I think one thing that's nice for recreational players or for recreational player pools is that it also kind of flattens the curve a bit on the payouts, because you're, instead of all the money being up in the top 2 or top 3, you're getting more of those pseudo min cashes or, double ups or triple ups. So it kind of keeps that money in the recreational part of the pool, which I think is good for everybody.
That is definitely good for everybody. That's a really good point, and I think that's why the sites love them. The sites may not have realized this at the start, but one thing sites always worry about from an ecosystem point of view is how quickly does money disappear out of the system. And if you have a format where it's very top heavy and the pros have a massive edge, then the rest of the field is just going to get clobbered very quickly and deposits disappear. But with PKOs, you knock somebody out, you effectively get some money back. So player deposits last much longer. The money circulates more. It's just better for the ecosystem overall. Yeah, and there's still a lot of money at the top, because when you take out the second place player, usually they've got a lot of bounties by then, and it still concentrates a lot of money. The bounties get bigger as you go along, which is a really nice innovation from just the old-fashioned knockout tournaments that were not progressive, where you just got the same piece every time. Yeah, it always felt a bit weird when you knocked the guy out last in one of those tournaments and you got your $50 for thing. Whereas now, as you said, in some of the big runner fields, it can be absolutely massive. And in fact, at the start, it made it so that the difference between coming first and second in a PKO was absolutely huge, because there was a difference between first place and second place money anyway. And then if you knocked the guy out, you got his bounties and you kept your own bounties. So that made heads up absolutely massive. And when I told a friend of mine, Jack Sinclair, that I was writing a book on PKO strategy, he said, well, all you have to do is tell people to win the tournament, because it's so important to win the heads up. Just write a book on heads up. But that's but the sites have kind of realized that now. So most PKOs, when you look at them, first and second place prize money is the same, and that's to sort of readjust for that. But it's still huge. When at the end of it, obviously it depends on the number of runners, but if you have a PKO with over 1,000 runners, by the time the two guys get heads up, they'll have a significant amount of bounties they'll be playing for. So it makes the heads up really important. So yeah, and I think for...
Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks. Well, for players like me, I have this problem where my chips are kind of magnetically attracted to the middle of the table. It doesn't matter if they're getting shoved in or if I'm calling. They seem to end up in the middle of the table all the time. So I feel like that style kind of favors my play a little bit. Could you give me a couple just entry-level tips for how to adjust to playing in knockouts? I know just paying attention to short stacks and widening ranges, but is there something in particular that I can look for to become a better player?
Yeah, well, what I would say is one very common misconception people have is that the bounties are more significant at the end of the tournament than they are at the start, and it's actually the other way around. If you knock somebody out in the first hand, you get back a quarter of buy-in, and you've only risked one starting stack to do that. So that's a pretty hefty bonus for knocking somebody out. So again, we go into this in detail in the book, but what that means is that if somebody moves all in, whatever price you're getting, if you work out that you normally need, let's say 50% equity, if it's just you against him to call, because of that bounty, that would just reduce down to, that'll come down to 44 or 45%. So there'll be a much wider range of hands that you can call with. He'll also probably be shoving wider because he can win your bounty as well. So at the start, bounties are very significant. And then obviously when somebody gets really short, it can make such a massive difference. Like if a guy is down to, let's say, a quarter of a starting stack and he still has a starting bounty, now you're basically getting a 15% what we call bounty discount. So instead of needing 50%, you only need 35%, which is moving us close to any two cards being a call. So at the start, they're very significant. At the end, the numbers will be quite big, but so will the number of chips. So what you're actually risking is in real terms much more. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see a lot of players make at the end. They adjust too much for the bounties, but at that stage, ICM starts to be a much bigger factor. And as you said, like, if you can win the tournament, that's absolutely massive, because you'll get all of your bounties and the guy that you knock out in second place. So really your strategy towards the end should be just sort of focusing on trying to win the tournament, rather than, oh, that guy's got a big bounty, I'll call him off fairly light, and that'll damage my thing. So that, I would say that's the biggest thing. Realize that at the start you're incentivized to gamble. And when we wrote Satellite, I said at some point in the book, I said that some players write to me about satellites and they say I seem to be bubbling a lot of them, and I always say, well, then you're probably playing them right. The best players bubble satellites more than other players, because they get to the end quite a lot. They understand that it's just about sort of essentially min cashing rather than trying to win the tournament. And it won't always work, so you will bubble quite a lot. So if you see somebody who is bubbling a lot of satellites, that's a very good player. I was lucky enough to win PokerStars UK IPT online qualifier the year 2 years running, the only 2 years they ran it, because I won more satellites on stars that year than anybody else. But I also bubbled more satellites than anybody else. That's kind of a hallmark of a good satellite player. PKOs are the opposite. If you're not busting a lot of PKOs in the first level, you're definitely not playing them correctly. The biggest mistake you can make is obviously play them like satellites, where you sort of eke through the tournament, you don't knock anybody out, then you're short, and you're just not competitive. You kind of have to realize that you're playing two tournaments, or it's a bit like a split pot game, where you compete. Anytime you cover somebody, you're competing for two pots. You're competing for the chips that are actually there, but you're also competing for his bounty. And that sort of changes the strategy. But as I said, as you go through the tournament, even though the bounties will get bigger relative to the amount of chips that are being risked, it'll get smaller. So usually by the end, it's not a very big consideration.
One question I had was whether, obviously we're living in a world where this is probably not possible, but, if we get back to a place where live poker becomes much more of a thing, and given the popularity of this and growing popularity of this online, have you seen this tried in the live sphere, and do you think we'll see more of it in the live sphere?
Yes, I have seen it tried in the live sphere. The traditional knockout tournaments, which are not progressive, where they've been around forever because it's easy. You just give everybody a chip and they cash that in at the end. Every time they knock somebody out, they get that player's chip and they just cash them in. But the progressive element obviously makes it more difficult, having to have the bounties. But with the technology, it's not actually that difficult now. One of the last events I went to was Unibet Open in Dublin, and they actually had a side event which was live progressive knockout. And I spoke to the tournament director, and he had it all worked out very well. He said, like, what you can't do is you can't give players extra chips, like cash chips, because poker players are always looking for an angle, and if they're moving tables, some of the chips will get slipped into the pocket, and they'll arrive at the new table, and suddenly they have a starting bounty again. So that's something which he was aware of. So he said, you just don't let the players handle the bounties at all. You leave it up to the dealer. So the dealer has an iPad with everybody's bounty connected to the central tournament clock. So if you arrive at the table, they just say, okay, what's your name? You give them, and then they know what your bounty is, and anybody can ask what it is. So it's, I think it's relatively easy to do. Whether or not it catches on, I'm not as sure that it will be as massively popular live, because I think live poker is different. So people kind of like being in a tournament for a long time. So I think a format which kind of incentivizes everybody to just push all their chips in the middle in the first orbit doesn't necessarily suit a lot of live players. I think a lot of live players will just say, no, I don't want to play that. That sounds too gambly. They may catch on eventually, but I think it'll be a lot slower. I think online, as soon as you get people to just try them, they like them 9 times out of 10. So it's very easy to get people hooked on them. But live, I think there'll be more resistance.
Yeah, me and Chris and Rob and John, we're going to drive to Running Aces, and we're going to sit down there, and there's Bluff Sterini Jim shoving all in every first hand. And I don't want to drive back home, and I don't want to do 6 buy-ins. versus online, maybe I will. So yeah,
Just
I think
hop in
that
another one, yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
interesting. That's his screen name, Bluffsterini. So yeah, this is PKO is set up just perfect for June. I'm kind of curious, switching gears a little bit, just because we're getting close to time. There's one question I really wanted to ask, which was kind of all the different stuff that you're doing. So you're playing poker, you're coaching, you're writing, you're podcasting, probably other things that we haven't talked about. What do you love doing more than anything? And I know you're probably going to say I love all of it because that's the right answer. But is there anything that just, man, when I do that, I just love that at this stage in your life?
From the moment I took up poker, and the answer really hasn't changed. The thing I really love above everything else is playing online poker. I just absolutely love it. And that hasn't changed at all down the years. When I fire up a session and I have all the tables in front of me, I'm just completely immersed in it. And I absolutely love it. I love the challenge of keeping track of everything, trying to work out what my strategy has to be in every situation. Situations coming up that I have to think about, and maybe I'm not sure if what I did is correct, so I kind of make a note that I need to review that hand afterwards. I love that whole process, and I play the number of tables that I need to play so that there's constant action. As much as I love live poker, the main thing I like about live poker is meeting people and the interaction and the whole social element. I find the actual experience of playing live poker quite slow. You're playing 22 hands an hour or whatever it is, compared to when I'm playing online, I'm playing 12 tables, which probably works out at about 500 hands an hour. So 25 hours of live poker, I play the same number of hands as I would in 1 hour of online. So for somebody who the main attraction for me about poker has always been as a sort of a puzzle game, just trying to work out what the strategy is and why. And that's best expressed by me playing online. I enjoy the other stuff as well. Like obviously when I'm coaching, I'm explaining strategies to people. When I'm writing, it's similar. And the part of the chip race I enjoy the most is the strategy corner. But yeah, for me, absolutely nothing beats just playing online poker. And for the first few years I played, I actually found it really, really difficult to take days off, because it would come to the time where I normally play and I would think, okay, well now I can do anything. What do I want to do? And the honest answer was I want to play online poker. I've kind of realized, last few years that I can't really do that. I can't just play every single day.
Why not?
I won't play quite as well, let's say. Now, I think 10 years ago, the general standard was so low and the edge of the average pro over the field was so large that even if you weren't playing optimally, playing, 16 tables, 10 hours a day, every single day, it didn't really matter because you were printing money in the long term. Now, standards have risen generally. I mean, everybody plays much better right across the board. Players who play absolutely atrociously tend to disappear very quickly from the ecosystem because they just lose their money too fast. So the people that you see around, I mean, I would say that there are recreational players that I know now who play better than players who are probably top 20, 30 in the world 10 years ago. That's how much the standards have risen. So because of that, you kind of have to pay more attention to those stuff, making sure that you're fresh every time you play, making sure you're not autopiloting and that stuff. So these days I try to play 5 days a week and take 2 days off. And I kind of view them as similar to when I was a runner. They're necessary rest days rather than anything else.
It really stinks for me because I started playing poker like 10 years ago and all I ever hear is, boy, 10, 15 years ago, it was like printing money. And I'm like, I never got a chance to experience those days when everybody was, now I'm the guy that everybody's taking advantage of, but I never had a chance to enjoy what that was like back then.
Yeah, I think no matter when you started, I mean, I started 2007, I think, and people say to me, oh, 2007 it was already over. You needed to start in 2004. Okay. That's when it was really, really soft. So it has kind of changed over the years. But I mean, in some ways, obviously, general standards are much higher these days. So you can't win just by having a fairly basic fundamental knowledge of strategy. But on the other hand, there's so much content out there compared to what there was. Like when I started, there was a couple of books. Most of them weren't particularly good. This was all pre-training videos, pre-solvers, pre all that stuff. So it was actually quite difficult to learn the game. You had to kind of figure it out on your own. And that was a sort of a barrier of entry. Whereas now, I sometimes take on students and, we do the first session to try and assess their level, and they're already at a really high level. They're talking about, I ran the simulation and it seemed to indicate this or whatever. So they're at a really high level. And then I say to them, how long have you been playing? And they go like, 4 months. And it just blows my mind every time, because you can advance really fast now, providing you obviously put in the work with the content.
Love it. So I just I want to respect your time. I'm going to sneak one more question here, because I play a lot of knockouts. I play online basically all the time, and I love playing poker online. Poker Tracker 4 is a great resource for me. What are some of the other resources that you use to multi-table, or just to capture your own data while you're playing online, or just to make playing online easier, more fun, more profitable? What are the tools and resources you use for that?
Sure, yeah. I use Poker Tracker as well. It is a great tool. It's unfortunate in the sense that more and more of the sites are sort of moving away from allowing you to use HUDs now, because, I mean, obviously if you're good at using a HUD, they give you some sort of advantage in game, but it definitely was never as big as people thought. Really, the main thing it allowed you to do is to multi-table more than and not have to pay attention to every table. But a secondary effect of HUDs disappearing is that it gets harder to review your own play now. 5 years ago, when I was coaching, if I was reviewing a hand history with somebody, we just went through their poker tracker. Now, more often than not, I'm looking at they've recorded a video of themselves playing, and we're talking through the spots, and that makes it a lot more difficult. But on the sites that do allow the HUDs, I still think it's an amazing learning tool, because you can review your own play either alone or with a coach. You can look at specific spots, like you can say, okay, I think maybe I'm calling too much on the river, so look at all the calls I've made in the last 3 months and see have I made money or lost money on those. See what hands I'm winning money with and losing money with. Like, I used to do this regularly throughout my career. Like, early on in my career, I saw I was losing. My biggest single losing hand was ace queen off. And that immediately allowed me to plug the leak up for, like, what am I doing wrong with ace queen off? What are the situations in which I'm losing? So that's a really good tool. Then I would say the other biggest thing you can do is the solvers. Now, they can be a little bit daunting at the start, but actually the pre-flop solver, ICMizer and Hold'em Resources Calculator are relatively intuitive and easy to use. The post-flop solvers like PKO and Munker are more difficult. There's another one which doesn't get talked about that much these days, but Poker Snowy I think is actually a really useful tool, particularly for recreationals, because it handles all the situations, every stack size, multi-way pots. Something like PKO only does heads of pots. You can only be 2 players involved. But Snowy I think is a great way, because you can just, you can drill through it all. You can look at the kind of spots that you think are giving you difficulty. It even allows you to do a mass import of your hands, and it'll plug hands that it think you had a problem with, and that's a really good review tool as well. I've been doing that with more and more of my students now, where they just send me their database of hands. We put it into Snowy, and then Snowy picks out the 20 or 30 hands where the player did something which it thinks was really bad, and I think that's a really fast way to plug leaks. So I think, particularly for recreational players who maybe don't have the kind of time to mess around spending hundreds of hours with PKO or Munker Solver, I think Snowy is something which could make a really big difference to your game very quickly.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. I want to respect your time as well. So if you're out there listening, listen to the chip race. If you're not listening to the chip race, start doing it. If you haven't read Poker Satellite Strategy, pick it up, read it. If you haven't read PKO Poker Strategy and you're a PKO player, pick it up, read it. If you're interested in coaching and you're connecting with what Dara is saying and kind of like his style, reach out to him. I assume he has capacity. If not, he'll make capacity for the right people. But is there anything else that you kind of give you an opportunity to plug, or just to share with Rec Poker Nation, that you kind of wish we had asked about as we wrap up here?
No, I think we've covered it all very well. I would say on the coaching that it's good in the sense that, like, my approach to coaching is basically to teach people how to teach themselves, rather than just have them ask me every spot for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. So it's very much sort of figuring out what solvers will work for them, show them how to use it. So most people, after 3, 4, 5 hours, we're done basically. That learned all they need to know. So that allows me to continually keep taking on new players, which is good as well. I would never want to be one of those coaches who just tries to milk people,
Right.
keep them on the teat for long. On the other stuff, as I mentioned, the lock-in, we do also put up strategy clips on the Chip Race YouTube channel. So there's a lot of really good stuff there. Some of it is animated strategy clips from the main show itself. So, for example, our most recent one, Phil Helmut was talking about hand he played against Jungle Man, and we add visuals to that, so there's an animated replayer, so people can follow the hand as it goes and listen to us discussing each of the streets and everything you need to consider. So we have about 20 of those strategy clips up there. We also put other strategy content. We did a micro stakes hand history review with Lyle Bateman, Elron. We've just put up another strategy one on PKO specifically, where myself and David reviewed a hand history with Barry Carter of a PKO he played. So and this is all completely free content. So I think that's a good place to start for people if they just want to get a flavor of what we do.
Perfect. Yeah, I forgot to mention the lock-in on YouTube. Make sure you check that out as well. And okay, the last thing then is the single best way for people to reach you is?
Probably Twitter. Twitter is kind of the central hub for me. I have the other social media as well, Facebook and Instagram. I even had TikTok for a while, but I couldn't really figure out what it was for. Yeah, it didn't seem like a good fit for my poker audience. So I do have a blog as well, which there's over 500 articles on there now. It's been over the course of my entire career. There is some strategy stuff there. There's a free strategy newsletter I put out as well, which you can sign up to from the blog. But yeah, I would say Twitter is probably the best place to hit me up.
All right, sounds good. Well, great to reconnect with you. A lot has happened since the last time we chatted. Hopefully the next bit until we have you on again is a little less uneventful. Hopefully we're talking about playing live poker, even though you'd rather be online. Hopefully,
well, I mean, I used to say I didn't think I would miss live poker if it went away, but I was completely wrong on that front.
Yeah, right.
I do miss it.
After 7 months.
Yeah, I feel like I need to go at least on one live trip every 5-6 weeks, just for balance purposes. Definitely being stuck in my house all day, it's not as much fun as I thought it would be. But it's great to see you're all doing well.
Yeah, we're having a blast. We're doing well. We're all like you. We're waiting for live poker to open, and maybe someday our paths will cross in 3 dimensions at the World Series or somewhere else. But until then, man, thank you so much. You're a great friend of the show, and you're doing great things helping recreational players. So hats off to you and David and the work that you're doing there.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, we're going to stick on
guys.
here. Feel free to jump off there, Dara, but
Sure.
fantastic stuff. All right, guys. So let's rehash some of that. What were some of your thoughts from the discussion?
Well, I'm just worried he's going to ruin knockouts for me like you ruined satellites for me. What the heck, Dara? We had a good thing going here in the knockout kingdom, and now everyone's going to know how to play knockouts using their HUD to target short stacks and take their money out of the winner's circle. Thanks a lot,
just
buddy.
Get your chips in the middle. You're fine.
It's my only strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to read the book because it's a format that I've dipped my toe into the water with, but I haven't done it very much. And I have to say, when I did it, I kind of was just like, well, I guess I'll just kind of play like normal, but I suppose I should be a little more aggressive, but really like not really with any sense of strategy or whatever. So I'm excited to read it and be a little bit more polished if I try to dip my toe further.
Yeah.
It sounds like you need to be really, really aggressive right off the bat. And then once you get towards the money or the actual payouts start, then you start playing normal poker again. So it seems like, it's kind of, we're doing the game plan, the study, that book by Matt Matros, and he has us doing things very aggressively to try to get to the money more often than a normal poker player or a rec player would just try to see if they could survive. Well, here it's not about that. It's about really amping up that aggression early on to try to get those bounties, and then hopefully at the same time you're going to make it into the money.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear how many people in Rec Poker Nation, we always get feedback on the show. How many are like, man, yeah, this is super good because I play a lot of PKOs, and I think that's something we can adjust for too if we get that kind of feedback. Like, how do we maybe integrate that in with the great John Somsky to figure out how to do a PKO home game or something.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'm not even sure if that's an option. It might be though now. They've added a lot of options to those. I know for me, I used to play a lot of online poker prior to Black Friday, but then after that, and I played. If there was a new variant that came out, I tried it and became relatively poor at it. Once I got to a point where I could start making money at it, I switched to something else. So,
Genius.
the difference is I haven't played many of the PKOs, so I'm kind of intrigued by that idea and learning how to play them. So that'll be interesting.
When I'm playing them, I kind of think of it as it's just instead of the tiebreaker being towards disciplined folds, the tiebreaker just puts a thumb on the scales towards getting those chips in. So it's really just for those cusp cases where, and this is just a general rule, like any general rule is going to be wrong a lot, but most people when they're playing in a freeze out typical tournament, the good advice is just to be like stay away from those cusp spots because it's not worth it to realize your equity edge. But I just like the idea that there's someone with a thumb on the scale saying, you know what, just get it in.
You just want an excuse to justify.
I do. Full disclosure.
Would love that too.
Yeah. Full disclosure.
Well,
the only other thing I said, the one thing that you can do sometimes, a lot of these knockout tournaments, they start with an ante structure right from the very beginning. So one thing I used to do is I would actually late reg about 10 minutes so that everyone at my table had a few antes out of their stacks, that when I sat down, I would cover more of the players there and they wouldn't cover me. I don't know if that's strategically effective because then you miss that chance to get chips on the first round, but that was something, another little thought.
Yeah, well, good stuff. Obviously, we could talk all night on that stuff, but great stuff. Thanks, Dara, so much for joining us on that stuff. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about our home games, John. What's happened over the past week or so in that deal?
Well, we had our mixed game series on October 14th. We played 5-card Omaha, and Evil Roy CA won his very first mixed game tournament. Yes, that is a Canadian.
Yes, it is. All right, a
Canadian. That was very disappointing how that ended for me.
Oh no! Really, tell us.
I had aces against kings. Whatever. Blah blah blah. It's 5 cards, so anything can happen. But made a deep run, so I was excited about it because I never really made a deep run in the mixed games. But whatever. Good. He's a good player. He or she, very good player. Yeah. Always in there mixing it up.
Hey, speaking of Canadians, aren't we owed an anthem at some point?
Nope. Apparently it's just died, Chris. It's apparently just died. I think we're just gonna let that one just kind of go.
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to keep promoting it as something that's going to At first, I thought it's a weird year. 2020 is a weird year. The year it didn't happen. I think
it doesn't count.
It counts, Steve. So I think we need to at least do something by Canada Day, which for you Yanks is July 1st. And if we haven't done something in the next 6 months or so, then something that we can replay on Canada Day, then we really have to go all out for Canada Day, I think. So thank you. Good point, Chris.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed. I think it's not going to happen.
Oh, no.
Okay, show of hands. Who thinks the ship has not sailed?
Muting the video now.
Of you listening, everyone's hand except for Steve is up.
It's a democracy.
Yeah.
Or is it a republic?
Okay. Moving on.
Okay, September Tournament of Champions winner, Keck Geek 65, nice. Jacob Keck, maybe.
Let's just mispronounce his name. He's winning too much. Let's just butcher his name and maybe he just goes away.
Well, I think I've said it wrong every single time, so I'm hoping.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a feature or a bug, but we're on that, Steve.
Yeah. Anyway, he won his first TOC tournament. October 12th, Mile High Magic Man David Phillips won his 3rd nightly series. Then come Binkley, Eric Jin won his 4th nightly series.
Nice.
Big Dog Day won his or her first nightly series.
Finally, Kelly, good job. Always in the mix. Nice work.
Abner Jack Burke won his 3rd nightly series. Lefty 19 Mike Buccello, 2nd nightly series. Oops. Captain Walleye Rob Adsom won his 4th nightly series.
The good Rob, as we call him.
Wow.
And then we're down to Oslo Burger, Tron Vidar Stensby won his 3rd international
He's on a
series.
roll.
And of course, Doug Drabeck can't take an opportunity not to win. So Magor 44 won his 2nd international.
Well, I mean, these fields are like, we should, like, people that have won more than 5 home games shouldn't be allowed in those small international. we gotta find a way to stop Maggers winning.
I think you must have made a bet with him earlier in the year that we were going to say his name every week on the podcast in some way or another. Because he's so far, I think he's been in here every week. It feels.
I got to get in there. We got to get in those international games.
Yeah, we got to start.
Maybe I just need to suspend him from
that.
The group. That's the only way I know of to ensure that he stops winning.
Yeah, seriously, it's an impressive run he's on.
Nicely done, Doug, and all the Drabeck clan.
Yeah,
that's why we only give out one bronze pin per year.
Way to go, Double D. I always call him Double D.
I know, and he's in the Epic League with some of you guys as well.
Yeah.
Our home game, which was supposed to start, I think, last weekend or something too.
Right.
Like, somebody sent me a text like, I'm sure this isn't happening, but just to verify, I'm like, yeah, it's not. Like, sad.
I know it. Miss live.
I do too. Well, anything else, John? Or
one last notification for people. We're going to have a new requirement for the home games.
Yeah.
So in order to play the home games, you have to have your PokerStars ID recorded in the PokerStars username field on the Rec Poker site. So that means you have to have an account in Rec Poker, and the username will have to be there. What we're going to do is we're going to do it in this 2-stage approach. Once we figure out what date is our go date, then from that point on, all users will not be approved into the home game unless they have met this requirement. And then starting next year, any existing members who have not met that requirement will be suspended from the club until they add their PokerStars home game name to their profile.
And just to be clear, folks, it's a free membership at rec.poker, and it takes less than 30 seconds to sign up and enter your PokerStars username in your profile field there. And it just makes John and Steve's lives so much easier being able to track that stuff and know who's who and getting people's contact information. So you're never going to have to pay to be in the home game. It's really not that big a speed bump, but just come make a free account, put your name in there, and join the club.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Okay. So if you have any questions on any concerns, whatever, you can still keep yourself private. So that's not a concern. But yeah, just get a hold of me if you want. Steve at rec.poker. Happy to walk you through that. But yeah, it makes all of our lives easier so that we can consolidate results, so we know who won, that we can get you the pins, all of that kind of stuff is helpful. Plus, I mean, remember, our ultimate vision is to be a community. Like our ultimate goal in life is not to be able to create home games that anybody can play. We love that that's a feature of it. And our ultimate goal is not to create a membership that you pay for. And our ultimate goal is not to create seminars. All of that stuff's good stuff, but our ultimate goal is to create community. And I think, as we're part of the same community, as we're in the forums together, as we're on Zoom calls, that's what's creating community. So we're just trying to be really consistent with what our vision is. All of the other stuff that we have going on is all feeding toward how do we create community, create lifetime relationships, create a positive, and encouraging vibe around that. So that's the reason that we're doing any of these changes, is to drive greater and greater community. So I'll step off the soapbox, but I just want to be clear on that. That's why we're doing it. We're not trying to make it more difficult. We're trying to add more value to your life. Grab hold of the value. Anybody else, what's going on that we need to update our folks on? Chris, Rob, Jim?
I guess we could say the next session for the Focus is coming up on Wednesday, November 11th. Chris Jones is leading that session, and we had our first planning meeting where we talked about some pre-flop opening ranges, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So go to rec.poker, check out the study groups, the Focus, and get involved in that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Do you guys want to give another 30-second overview kind of on what the Focus is in case people
so the Focus is going to be a monthly study group where the group's going to come. If you missed that first session, just join us in November. All you missed was some planning and talking about what we want this thing to be, but you can come and help shape that. And so for the first session, we're kicking off talking about pre-flop ranges, and we're going to be talking about raising first in, or when we put money as the first person to act into a pot. We're going to talk about ranges from various positions. We've got a good conversation started, and everyone's doing some homework. And the idea is really that it's going to be a lot of independent study that we then come together once a month to have a conversation with lots of time to have a conversation around what we kind of came up with over that month. So it should be really good.
And I
that's
see
available
Kim,
for
one of
premium
our members,
right?
Kim, in the chat. Yeah, one of our premium members, Kim, in the chat here is just saying that she's actually working on her ranges right now as we're talking. So I love that part of it where we're just sort of working on this throughout the month, getting together, sharing our results. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, so if you're a premium member, like Kim, you can participate in those conversations. We record them. The videos are made available as part of the archive for the premium members. And you can also jump on these podcasts. Every time we record one of these podcasts, you're a premium member, you jump on here, you can ask questions, engage with the guests, all that stuff. So, you don't have to be a premium member, but it does have its benefits there. And if that's something of interest to you, you can actually use the code RECPOKER when you sign up, and you get $10 off your first $15 a month payment. So you pay $15, get $10 off, use the code RECPOKER, try it for $5. If you don't like it, go back to your regular free membership. We think there's a ton of value. And in the meantime, for that month, watch as many videos as you can. Chris Jones does seminars since when? Since January? Or when did we start doing those seminars? Like, it's been crazy.
February was our first.
February. It's like
first.
8 months of 8 or 9 months of these very, very good seminars that are part of our video archive. So check that out as well. So maybe that's enough for tonight, guys. Great stuff, I think, with Dara. Great updates on what's going on. John, thanks again for all your work on the home games. It's so much fun it's fun and depressing to see who's winning all the time out there, but it's mostly fun. But thanks to you guys. Make sure you check out Rec.Poker. Sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our sponsors, Running Aces, Casino, Racetrack, and Hotel. Thank you to Website AMP. Thank you to Learn Pro Poker. Thank you to our guest, Dara O'Kearny. Thank you to our panel, Jim Reed, John. I'm laughing because Jim forgot to start the music. Jim Reed, John Somsky, Chris Jones, and the great Rob Washam. And we will chat with you guys next week. Take care.